The ceramic mug my mother slammed against the granite counter cracked clean in half, and the coffee inside, still hot, I'd just watched her pour it, hit my forearm and the front of my blouse in a single wave. The burn came fast, sharp enough to make me hiss through my teeth and grab my own wrist like I could hold the pain back. I stood there in my parents' kitchen, the morning of the most important interview of my life, scalded and dripping, watching my mother stare at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. She didn't say sorry. She said, "You're being completely unreasonable." My father had just walked in from the garage. He looked at my arm, at the shattered mug, at the coffee running off the counter edge. He looked at me. He said, voice completely level, no anger in it at all. And that was somehow worse than anger. "Your brother's path is what matters in this house. It always has been. I'd think by now you'd understand that." Then he walked to the refrigerator, poured himself a glass of orange juice, and sat down at the table. That was 3 years ago. Last spring, they both faced what I'd spent 2 years quietly building toward, the consequences, every single one of them. My name is Delilah Marsh. I'm 29, and I live in a studio apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, 2 miles from the hospital where I work 12-hour shifts as a registered nurse. The apartment is small. Galley kitchen, 1 deep windowsill where I keep a rosemary plant, a bathroom where the tiles are slightly crooked but the hot water works, and it is entirely mine. My name on the lease, my credit on the application, no one else's. I grew up 20 minutes south of Charlotte, in a subdivision off Route 51, the kind of neighborhood where every house is one of 4 floor plans and everybody parks their cars neatly in the driveway and pretends everything is fine. My parents moved there when I was 9. By the time I was old enough to understand money, I understood that appearances in that neighborhood were everything. I started paying rent to live in my own childhood bedroom the month I turned 18. $350, cash, first of the month. My mother had left an envelope on the kitchen counter, with my name written on it in her careful handwriting. No conversation beforehand, just the envelope. I got the message. My brother Kaysen was 15 then, 7 years younger. He never paid a cent. Not at 15, not at 18, not at 22 when the mug hit my arm. The house rules changed entirely depending on who they applied to. By the time I was 24, I was working as a CNA at Mercy General, certified nursing assistant full-time, plus 2 or 3 rideshare delivery shifts a week to cover the rent and gas and the occasional grocery run where I allowed myself something name brand. Tips on deliveries were unpredictable. Some nights I'd make $40, some nights 11. I kept all of it in a savings account I didn't mention at home. The way the house worked was like this. I came home from a 10-hour shift and made my own dinner from groceries I'd bought, stored on the shelf in the pantry with a sticky note that said my name, because my mother kept a separate set of things for Kaysen. Thick-cut bacon, expensive almond butter, the orange juice in the glass bottle instead of the plastic jug. I ate generic. I bought generic. My mother called it practical. Kaysen was still developing, she said. His body needed fuel. I was already grown. After dinner, I cleared the table, all of it. Even the dishes Kaysen left when he pushed back his chair mid-sentence and wandered upstairs with his phone. If I left anything for morning, my mother would sigh loudly enough to be heard through the floor. So I did the dishes. Tired from the hospital, hands smelling like latex and antiseptic, scrubbing pots while the dishwasher ran. Kaysen's car appeared in the driveway around his 19th birthday. Used Nissan, 4 years old, good condition. My father said he'd gotten a deal through someone he knew. I drove a 2000 Civic with a cracked dashboard and a side mirror I'd taped back on with electrical tape. I'd bought it myself for $4,200. No one helped. I'm not saying this to make myself sound like a martyr. I'm saying it because it's the context for everything that came after. You need to understand what the water temperature was before you understand why it finally boiled. About a year before the mug incident, I came home late from a double and found my parents sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out between them. I'd come in quiet. They didn't hear me. I stood just outside the kitchen doorway and listened. My mother was asking about Kaysen's fall registration. Fees were higher than expected. Was the account going to cover it? My father said something about moving money from the landscaping fund. My mother said they'd done that twice already. He said they'd figure it out. That word, the account, snagged in me like a splinter. I had asked at 18, before I started paying rent, whether there was anything set aside for my own education. My mother had said no, there wasn't money for that. My father had said getting to work early and working hard was the best education there was. I had accepted that. I had built my entire plan, CNA certification, night classes, the assumption that there was simply no RN, around the assumption that there was simply no money. There was a fund, it just didn't have my name on it. Lying there that night, I pulled up another memory I'd filed under bad luck years earlier. When I was 21, I applied for a competitive nursing scholarship through a foundation connected to Mercy General. Significant money, tuition, fees, a stipend, and a fast-track clinical cohort with guaranteed pay placement. I spent 2 months on that application. I made it through the first 2 selection rounds. I told my mother I'd made the second cut. She said, "Don't get your hopes up." Then I didn't make the finalists. The program coordinator emailed saying my application had been withdrawn at the week 3 stage. I called and asked if it was an error. She said no, it showed a voluntary withdrawal. I assumed a system glitch. I was too defeated to push. I filed it under my own inadequacy and kept moving. Lying in the dark that night, listening to Kaysen's TV murmuring through the wall, I thought about that withdrawal for the first time in 3 years. My mouth went dry. 4 months later was the morning of the mug. I had finally completed the RN Bridge program coursework. I had my NCLEX scheduled and was scoring well on practice tests. I had an interview, a real one. The nurse manager's office, 2 hours blocked off, for a registered nurse position at Mercy's step-down unit. I'd ironed my blouse the night before, laid out my folder, resume, certifications, 2 letters of reference, set my alarm for 6:15. Kaysen appeared in the kitchen at 7:30 in his boxers and a sweatshirt with the tag still on. He poured cereal, the expensive kind with the maple clusters, and leaned against the counter scrolling his phone. I was already dressed, eating toast standing up. He looked up eventually. "Hey, can you drop me off at Devon's on your way out? My car's making a grinding noise. Brakes, probably." Devon's was in the opposite direction from the hospital, not remotely on my way. I said I had an interview and he could call a friend. He said Devon's study group started at 8:30 and it was important. I said so was my interview. He said the internship he was pursuing, arranged by my father through one of his landscaping clients, was more valuable long-term than just a shift job. Just a shift job. My mother came in from the back hallway, still in her housecoat. Kaysen filled her in. She turned to me and said it was one trip, and family helped each other, and didn't I know how hard Kaysen was working to get established. I said no, I was not moving my interview. That's when she picked up her mug. I don't think she meant to break it on the counter. I think she meant to set it down hard enough to make a point. But the mug cracked, the coffee went sideways, and my forearm caught the worst of it. Sharp heat. Immediate red. The front of my blouse, the one I'd ironed, was ruined. My father came in from the garage 30 seconds later, took in the scene, and said what he said. No yelling. Flat certainty. like he'd already decided the conclusion and was just confirming it out loud. I went upstairs, changed the blouse, ran cold water on my arm for 2 minutes, applied concealer to the worst of the redness, grabbed my folder. Kaysen was on the couch when I walked back through. He didn't look up. My mother was on the back porch. My father was eating his toast. I drove to the hospital. The nurse manager's name was Dr. Beckett, late 40s, direct, the kind of person who asked a question and actually listened to the answer. About 40 minutes into our conversation, she glanced at my forearm. The burn had raised, pink along the edge of my sleeve. "That's recent," she said. I told her the truth, not all of it, enough. She was quiet for a moment. "I'm asking because situational stress is relevant, not because it's your fault." She made a note. "You still came in." I said I wasn't going to miss it. She hired me. The offer letter came that evening. I sat in the hospital parking deck and read it 3 times. I moved out 11 days later. I'd been making arrangements since that morning. A coworker named Tamsin had connected me with her neighbor Lonnie, 60-something, retired hospital facilities management, the type who minds his business and keeps his gutters clean. He had a spare bedroom off Woodlawn Road. Small, east-facing window, a door that locked. I took it. I packed when my parents were out. Tamsin helped. Clothes, laptop, medications, my documents folder, a few books, 2 trips in her SUV. I left the furniture. I sent a text saying I was gone. I wished them well. I'd be in touch when I was settled. My mother called twice. I let it go to voicemail. About 6 weeks after moving, I was going through a cardboard box I'd grabbed in a hurry, mostly old mail and random papers from my nightstand. Near the bottom was an envelope I didn't recognize at first. Return address. A credit card company. My name on the front. I didn't have that card. I opened it. A balance I'd never run up. 14 months of purchases. Electronics retailer. Gaming hardware. The same brand that sat on Kaysen's desk. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Then I went to annualcreditreport.com and pulled all 3 bureaus. $41,200. 5 accounts. The oldest opened when I was 20 years old. I'd never signed anything. I'd never held those cards. The bills went to my parents' house, and they'd maintained the minimum payments just enough to keep the accounts open and the collections agencies quiet. I went through the statements line by line. Electronics, Kaysen's brands, Kaysen's model numbers, a 0-turn mower and a commercial-grade trimmer in model numbers I recognized from my father's landscaping equipment. Tuition payments to Kaysen's community college in amounts that matched exactly what I'd overheard my parents discussing that night in the kitchen. They had opened credit in my name while telling me there was no money. While I worked overnight shifts and ate generic cereal and handed over cash in an envelope every single month. I could barely breathe. I almost missed the scholarship connection. I was going through an old folder, physical papers from that application period when I was 21, looking for something else when the coordinator's acknowledgement email fell out. I'd printed it. I'd been so proud of making the second cut that I'd printed the confirmation and put it in a folder, kept it like proof of something. I called the program office the next morning. The current administrator pulled this historical record and sent me a screenshot of the email that had withdrawn my application. The address it came from was not mine. I recognized it immediately. It was a Hotmail account my mother had used for years, household subscriptions, utility paperwork. I had seen it on bills on the kitchen counter dozens of times. She had gone into the scholarship portal, using my application credentials, easily accessible since I'd used the home computer to apply, and sent a withdrawal email in week 3 of the selection process. I had lost a scholarship that would have changed everything because I would have left. If I'd had funding and a clinical cohort and a stipend, I would have moved out at 21 and not come back. She knew that. She'd made sure it didn't happen. I went to the legal aid clinic the following week. An attorney named Ms. Harrow took my case. She went through everything I brought, credit reports, statements, the scholarship screenshot, without rushing. When she looked up, she said, "Identity theft by family members, and the email provides corroboration and with a financial opportunity. The paper trail here is solid." She paused. "Criminal charges are likely given the dollar amount. Are you prepared for what that means?" I thought about my father's voice in the kitchen, the flatness of it, the certainty, his future, not yours. I said yes. We filed the police report first, then the FTC identity theft report, which generated the affidavit I needed to dispute every account with all 3 bureaus. I put freezes on all 3 credit files the same afternoon. The detective assigned to the case, Financial Crimes Unit, methodical, older, explained each step before he took it. Subpoenas went to the banks for account records and IP logs. The credit applications had been submitted from the IP address registered to my parents' home router. Shipping confirmations for the electronics went to my parents' house. The mower and trimmer invoices were cross-referenced with my father's business account, where he'd written them off as business equipment deductions. When those deductions were flagged, the IRS field office got a referral. 3 years of underreported landscaping income and personal expenses classified as business costs. My father's business dried up fast. Word spreads without anyone knowing exactly where it's coming from. Commercial clients dropped him quietly. His equipment supplier started requiring payment up front. He didn't know where the pressure was originating. My mother left a voicemail through a workaround number. I listened to the first few seconds, recognized her voice, deleted it. I didn't need to hear the rest to know what shape it would take. My father emailed my old address. His email said he wanted to explain. I forwarded it to Ms. Harrow. Kaysen showed up at the hospital parking lot one afternoon. I still don't know how he knew my schedule. Security stopped him at the entrance. He left. He didn't try again. 14 months after the police report, I sat in a courtroom in uptown Charlotte. My father came in cuffed. He'd lost weight. His face had a drawn-in look I didn't recognize. He scanned the room when he entered, found me in the gallery, held eye contact for 2 seconds, then looked forward. No expression. My mother came in behind him, dark clothes, hair pulled back. She glanced at me once and then looked down at her hands. She looked older in a way that wasn't about age. The charges covered 5 counts of identity theft, 2 of wire fraud, and for my father, 3 counts of tax evasion. The prosecutor laid it out methodically. Account opening dates, application IP addresses, shipping records, tuition payments matched to my credit line, the landscaping deductions. My victim impact statement was in the packet the judge had reviewed. The defense argued financial desperation, intention to repay, a family misunderstanding that escalated. My mother took the stand and cried, said she'd thought of it as temporary borrowing, said she'd never imagined it would go this far. She looked at the jury, not at me. My father decisions under pressure. Said he'd planned to pay me back when the business recovered. His attorney talked about the hardship of running a small business. The judge was not moved. My father received 28 months state prison. My mother received 4 years probation, full restitution to me, every dollar charged in my name plus statutory penalties, and mandatory financial counseling. The house was the primary asset. It went to an auction within 90 days of sentencing. I watched them lead my father out. He paused at the door and turned around. He looked at me and said quietly, but I heard it, "This doesn't fix anything." I said, "It wasn't supposed to fix anything. It was supposed to be the truth. The door closed. The house sold that fall. My mother moved to her sister's place in Tennessee. The restitution came in monthly installments, routed through the court's enforcement office. Kaysen's Nissan was repossessed when the financing, tied to one of the fraudulent accounts, dissolved. He dropped out of community college mid-semester. Last I heard, through someone I know from the old neighborhood, someone I didn't ask but who told me anyway. He's working a warehouse job outside the city. My side moved forward. I passed the NCLEX on my first attempt. The letter came on a Tuesday morning. I read it sitting on Lonnie's back porch with a cup of coffee I'd made myself. Registered nurse. I typed my license number into the hospital credentialing system that afternoon and sat there looking at it for a minute longer than I needed to. I signed a lease on my studio 2 months later. 8th floor, west-facing windows, evening light coming in long and gold across the kitchen counter. I bought a bed frame from a consignment shop. I built a bookshelf myself. It took 3 hours. I put 2 pieces on upside down the first time. It still wobbles slightly on one side, and I don't care at all. The credit cleanup took nearly 2 years. Certified dispute letters, follow-up calls, freezes, and temporary lifts. Each fraudulent account was flagged and closed. Balances zeroed as the restitution payments flowed through the court system and back to me. I watched the score climb in increments, 40 points one quarter, 22 the next. My first credit card approved in my own name only was a Visa with a $2,500 limit. I held it in my hand and thought about every time I'd accepted that there was simply no money. Every no I had taken as a fact of the world, when it was actually a door being held shut. My mother sent a handwritten card once, 2 pages, postmarked from Tennessee. I read the whole thing. She said she was sorry. She said she'd had reasons. She hoped someday I'd understand the pressure they'd been under. There was no sentence in it that said, I took your future and use it to keep you in place. There was no sentence that named what she had actually done, just reasons and pressure and someday. I put it back in the envelope and filed it. Not because I need the evidence anymore, because she wrote it and she should have to have written it. I'm 30 now. I work 3 12-hour shifts a week in the cardiac step-down unit. My coworkers know the broad shape of my history, made her own way, no family close by, but not the specifics. Tamsins knows most of it, Lonnie knows some. Most of the people I work with know me as someone who shows up on time and stays calm when things go sideways on the floor. That's enough of a reputation to build on. I have full benefits. I schedule my own doctor appointments and I keep them. Everyone rescheduled only when I choose to reschedule them. No one tells me my health can wait because someone else's education is the priority right now. The thing I kept coming back to, in the months after the trial, is the difference between what I thought I'd feel and what I actually felt. I thought it would feel like winning. It didn't. By the time I sat in that courtroom, it felt more like watching the world operate the way it was supposed to. They committed crimes. I reported crimes. The law moved. That's what accountability looks like when it actually functions. The hardest part wasn't reporting. The hardest part was the nights before I filed. Lying in Lonnie's spare room, running the math, trying to find a version of the story where what they'd done was something I could fold back into normal and live with. They were still my parents. That word carries weight that has nothing to do with behavior. I couldn't find that version, because I kept coming back to being 21 and making the second cut of a scholarship I'd worked for, and being careful not to celebrate, and losing it, and thinking it was bad luck. Filing that loss under my own inadequacy for 3 years, I kept coming back to every rent envelope I'd filled in cash, every dish I'd washed bone-tired, every time I'd accepted we were a family with limited resources. We weren't. The resources were just limited to me. I drive home from night shifts when the city is still half dark and the streetlights are cutting out one by one. I have coffee in my own kitchen. I water the rosemary plant on the windowsill. I have the life I built for myself with nothing borrowed from anyone and nothing taken. Walking away from people who are hurting you isn't betrayal. I used to believe loyalty to family meant absorbing whatever they decided to do to me. It doesn't. Some relationships don't survive when the person who's been losing stops agreeing to lose. That's not something I caused. That's just what was always underneath.